Hi guys, welcome to the final episode of YarninBlak Series 5. We're really lucky today to actually have one of my favorite people, and that is Ricki Spencer come back and talk. You might remember Ricki from my first ever episode, but I'm so glad that she's made it able to come back. So hi Ricki.
Hi, lovely to be here again.
It's been a wonderful journey that I've had, and I'm glad you were my first guest. And when I got to series 5, I'm going to go. I want you to be the my final guest for the year, but also to catch up what you've been doing.
Well,
So,
thank you for having me here.
no, thanks. So, since we spoke earlier in series 1, what have you been doing? What are you up to now?
So yes, I'm just plottering around in life. One of my passion areas is evolving into the health space, more into health messaging, especially amongst digital health messaging and the apps that are used in for people accessing primary health care, especially. So being connected with the Royal Melbourne Hospital and Breast Screen Victoria, I'm now sit on the board of Safer Care Victoria. And that's an important space because what it's looking at is how can we improve the safety and well-being in hospital settings for communities, but most importantly for First Nations people. What is it when something goes wrong? Why does it go wrong? And what can we do better? Because it's so important that people who access hospital services tend to access them when they're at their most critical in care. People tend to stay away from that, and we have to consider why is it? Is it the fact is it the privileging of the space? Is it the fact of fear, the unknown, or is it a combination of cultural, not feeling safe enough, the isolation, being away from country for those who are born on country, and then having to access these services um, far away from their homes and families. And that is problematic. We want to improve their health and safety and well-being. So part of that journey in that is looking at some people might see the boring bits, which is the data that's collected, and then to look for any trends and look for ways in which we can work more effectively. So I come on the board. I guess I'm one of the two live, living lived experience panel members, along with the other stakeholders. But both of us are also studying as well. And that's what I have to mention. So I've also commenced my master's in public health because it's important that if you are in the space of healthcare, that you really need to look at and understand the social determinants of health provision and how it's brought together, and to understand the different power structures that are in place, to understand, these are systems of care, and how can we make sure that everybody who access that space, whatever stage of life cycle they're in, to be able to do it and to have the same amount of quality of care as anybody would have. But we know at the moment that there are certain groups and communities that get less quality care for a number of reasons, and that's what I'm there hopefully to do, to advise and then help to bring back to communities to sort of build that bridge to kind of see what things can be done better.
The question: would you define cultural safety for a variety of minority groups in the hospital setting? What would you
Mm.
say would be culturally safe
That's
practice?
a really good question. And one of that question kind of lends to the fact that if we get cultural safety right, firstly for all people who are First Nations, then you'll get it right for other people and other spaces. So it's really about how do we interact with that space, the physical space. So we look at how is it located? How do we, the fact that it's very, as we know, it's very white in terms of its color scheming. It's very much the way it's set up in terms of the hospitals. The expectation is that everything is digitized, that you have all this information at your disposal. And that's quite difficult for a lot of people to have to disclose. The other problem is it's we try and be trauma informed in the way we do servicing, but sometimes the type of questions that people get, they have to fill in and ask, and having to retell their stories a number of times does impact people's well-being. And when you look differently from other people, you stand out. And if you feel as though people are kind of signaling you that you're somehow different, or you tick the diversity box, therefore we've got to get the Indigenous liaison officer at you. Well, that's not the case for everybody. Not everybody who comes in wants that. Yeah. But then again, it's the approach. It's also the way you're looked after. And to understand that, when you're put into an artificial space that's enclosed, that may not have windows or very limited windows, and you've got all this jargonistic talk that's happening around you, that's very disempowering. And there is a fear too of what happens. Remembering hospitals are a space that is associated with harm for a lot of people. A lot of people, first encounters may have had their children removed through agencies such as, child protection. They've come to the surveillance of health authorities. So there is that mistrust. So that's it's very problematic. So it's not just about, having a picture on the wall, or having a statement that says we welcome everybody, or acknowledging the lands on which we're present at that space. It's about the work practice. It's about every single person who is employed or volunteer in that space really understands and respects the person's positionality and embodiment that they present. And remembering there are many of us who are fair-skinned, so we don't necessarily encapsulate perhaps a stereotype, or darker skin. So to understand that it's so important that the way we have a dialogue, the speaking with the person, all through to the respect of acknowledging kinship, acknowledging how you want your information shared.
I love that project, and I think you'll do so well in that space. But I want to bring up one of the things you mentioned is trauma-informed practice, because at the moment I'm doing my graduate cert in trauma-informed practice. And one thing that I want our listeners to walk away with sometimes is that in our space we hear practitioners always saying we work in a trauma-informed. And the biggest thing that I don't understand is I don't know if they really know where our trauma is coming from.
Yes, exactly. And understanding that when you have people tell their stories, and the way you get people to tell their stories, that's complex in itself. Mm-hmm. And you have to always think as a practitioner, what information do I need from this person? How much of the information can I get without causing distress to the person? Is it relevant for the services that they're trying to access? So in the case, and I'll just give back to my example, if you're somebody who was taken away at birth from your mum and adopted, and there's secrecy, and if we're talking back in the 60s, then I have to always explain that story, my story, and it's like I have to validate and prove that. And that is trauma, because it's not just the words I'm speaking, it's the behind the thoughts. It's the fact that, oh, I am different. Oh, I don't look like this person. Oh, I don't know who my family is. And it's sort of like accumulative, it sets a pattern, and the presumption is made that somehow, oh, you don't know, you haven't found? Why haven't you found? Haven't you looked hard enough? So that's one aspect for people from stolen and who were taken out or removed from homes. The other thing of trauma-informed people need to be aware is this: for many of us who've had have complex mental health conditions, you come into a space where you're asking for a particular service or wanting to get a particular service, and you're having to disclose very intimate aspects of your being.
Yeah.
And I always wondered to myself, people get taught in social work and psychologist programs and healthcare settings how to elicit the information from somebody. But do we get told, how do we then, once you've got that information, how do we nurture that person who's just given that information? How can we sit with them authentically and help heal them in that space for that moment? And do that, because it's one thing to give you that information and then you've got that to formulate whatever picture you need for the health plan or recommendation. But where does that leave the person that's given that? You're very empty, you're very exposed. You're opening up wounds of pain and hurt possibly. How do you heal the person? How do we comfort them culturally to say, are you okay? How do you feel about disclosing this part of the information?
And doing that without actually re-traumatizing them.
Yeah, yes.
I'm thinking of some of the kids that I work with, that we know that 50% of our Aboriginal kids are in out-of-home care. So even having that conversation with the little kids sometimes going, so tell me about your family, can be quite traumatizing if they're not actually living with their family.
Yes, that's a great question, a great response, because this is what I get all the time and the stuff that I do. And I talk it back to myself because it's sort of like an experience for people similar. The word you mentioned, the word family, is a trigger word. And that's what sometimes therapists don't realize. They just presume, oh, it's just a social, schema of what. But that in itself is very much a pain for many young people and older people, because we all look around us and we see what some people have and what some people don't have. And that already sets the brain into a certain way of thinking. For some of us who have attachment disorders, it brings that fear of, why did this happen to me? Now I'm having to explain this to you. And that person has this power over me because I'm saying I have some type of deficit because I don't fit the narrative of having a family of support. I somehow now have to explain for the actions of others what has led me to this space with you today.
Yeah. Do you think that the work that you are doing, people are listening to you?
I don't know.
I hope they are.
I hope they are. Look, and it's a really difficult one, because I think the difficulty I have is twofold. One is my presentation and the fact that I have no formal connection, makes, even for myself, and I always say to people, I have not been born on country, so I cannot speak for particular social connections and that, but I can speak what it's like to be somebody who was uprooted, who doesn't have a sense of cultural identity in terms of they're trying to form something based in community. And it's really difficult, and I can only speak from my own lived intersectional experience and what that looks like when you remove something that's known to others who have given it. And I try and make sense of what's happening to me, and hopefully me making sense of what's happening to me and having empathy for those that are removed can hopefully shed light into what we should be considering to make health spaces more enriched to become feeling safe. And I keep using that word safe. It's to having to feel that when I come into this built environment, I am going to be respected. I'm not going to be hurt. I'm going to be believed. And that's really difficult. And for a young person who's been removed forcibly, they didn't have a choice in that. A lot of the times that choice was taken away. And I found that whether people in protection roles and policing, and that they have good intentions, but realizing when you remove something that is so familiar to a young person, it has residue impacts on them, on the way they consider everything else in terms of permanency. That sense of permanency that a young child has is gone, because other children have that. They see their parents every day. Maybe they have disagreements, but they're not removed. But when you remove a child and they lose that sense of permanency, it does something to the brain and the way they see the world around them. And the trust is very much fragile, more than what it was prior to the person being removed from the home.
How do we get our practitioners to really understand where the trauma actually occurs? Because you always hear them go, colonization, stolen gen, and that's about as much as they can get. But it's breaking it down like you and I are talking now to stuff that's actually happening in 2023 that's still causing trauma.
Because the system, we've got to sort of move away from those words, because the words are just words, and the concept. It's about having that safety dialogue with people, having people who've gone through things similar in these roles. We need to kind of look at how do we support other First Nations practitioners coming on to the space and respecting that they can make a really good contribution to the healing process in that space and not be overwhelmed. It's one thing that you come in and as soon as you identify as being part of this community, it's as though there's all of a sudden amount of pressure and expectation that you will solve all the problems. And just because you're there, it's supposed to make a difference, whether it's domestic violence services, whether it's child first services. It's, it's complicated, and trauma is something that's sometimes it's a lifelong exploration, attachment. I always say to people, think about it, if you're one day you're in a home and when you're going to get fed, when you go to sleep, and all that's taken away from you. The sense of smell, the sense of familiarity is gone, and you're put into a temporary space, and then that's taken away, and then that's taken away. What does it do to you? What does it build in terms of your internal state? It does something to you. And it's not just a matter of having someone say, oh, yes, it's colonialist, and, we've got some, and it's coming from all sides, so, oh, we've got to do protest this, we've got to de-establish this. And, it doesn't help the person at that time when all they're wanting to do is to get some sense of healing. And that healing is different for different people. For some people, it's that they want to get back their internal sense of, who am I? And I want to belong. I want to belong somewhere. And that is uniquely different to every single person, because it depends on their own worldview, whether they're 5 or whether they're 95. It's you've got to be where the person's at. And the connection, to making a connection with that person authentically, and the language you use, and being able to sit with the person. And what I mean by sit with them, I mean emotionally sit with them, not move them on because you need to move them on. Give them the autonomy to allow them to sit in if it's the pain, if it's the anger, let them sit with that. but give them the safety of that little space you've created where they can articulate, whether that's verbally, whether that's through art, whether that's through music, whether it's through kinesthetically, to let it out so that they can connect to their feelings.
Look, I love all the work that you do, and I love the different aspects of diversity that you look at, the gender kind of components, the disability kind of component, and the Aboriginality component. Do you think there's any one area that people are starting to get more than one of the other areas per se? Or do you think that...
Yeah, I think people get intersectionality because it's out there, but I don't think in terms of Aboriginality there is, because at the moment you have the big campaign for the yes and the no vote, and you're having people come out and say different things, and it's focusing on the power, because it's all looking at power, you know, looking at that external thing that we don't see it, but it exists. And all the people, the everyday people, are getting kind of lost in that. You know, it's putting pressure on people. It's like you have to have a position on this because, oh, it's to do with you. And you feel like saying, well, you don't know me. You don't know my experience. You don't know what life is like for me. And it's really difficult because one thing that, you know, we talk about with writing that we don't hear much is that, and I've always said this for a long time, how it feels for young people, especially in schools. We have all these events in the year. We have Mother's Day. We have Father's Day. You know, we have Pride Day. We have all that now in schools. But you think what it's like if you can't experience that, you know, or a birthday. You know, you don't have that one day of connecting, you know, and I call it, you know, deeper connection to others. What does that do for you? And it does, like, and what does it mean to be Aboriginal in 2023? You know, we still get questioned about color. I mean, get this ridiculous notion that some talk about DNA and, you know, how much are you? And, you know, it's like no other cultural identity gets that. But for some reason, it's as though your motives have to be questioned. And you feel like saying, why would I want to go through all this to be ridiculed and put myself in the public and make that? And then you come out and attack, and it comes attacks from within, it comes attacks from the outside. And it's quite ugly because, you know, for a community that's been through so much, and we still have a lot that, you know, people judge, and the misconception is still there that, oh, if you're Indigenous, you have extra services, you get extra treatment, you know, you get bypass, and it's just not true, you know. And housing is one at the moment. People think, oh, you know, and it's not the case. But unfortunately, people are looking for scapegoating, and maybe people don't want to realize that what has happened in the past, you know, that they don't want to deal with it, or they think you've got to leave it in the past. But if you have never had a choice in that past and you're living, well, then you can't manufacture that, because you can only live your life as to what you were allowed to live and given. So for me, it's really, I don't think that understanding is there yet. I don't think people understand the complexity of what it was like to be with a, if you want to call the word race, to have very little connection or very understanding, to have a lot of communities who were wiped out, you know, so long ago, and what it could have been had it not been that, and then to try and make sense of it. It's really hard. It's really, really difficult. And then to try and navigate your sense of self and moving on, I don't know. It's really, really difficult. But that's just my experience. And again, I keep prefacing that. Different for different people, different. And isn't it interesting that in 2023, skin tone is still one of the determinants that people always fall back on? And I don't understand that, because how can you judge someone by their skin tone? But yet it just seems to be that one statement, you don't look Aboriginal. And I think to myself, I never hear someone say, you don't look Greek, or maybe, I don't know, or you don't look Australian. And I think, what does that mean? You know, but for some reason, people are allowed to say, you don't look Aboriginal. And I think, wow.
And on the other attributes that you mentioned before, like disability, gender, someone doesn't normally ask someone, if someone says that they're gay, for example, well, how gay are you?
Yeah, exactly.
How
Yeah,
long have you been gay for?
yes, thank you. But for but for that, it says the presumption is you have acquired this,
Yes.
you know, and you don't. This is not part of your this is something that's manufactured, or is, yeah. Whereas you're right, but we did for a long time probably did say, you know, oh, what event created you to become gay or trans? You know, what trauma has impacted you to have, so something deficit must have happened, and it's very different things. You know, it's like people who've come in as refugees, you know, and the same experience, you know, of identity. It's complex. And like disability, we have people, invisible disabilities, you know, people still talk. I mean, there is more awareness of it, but there is still discrimination even in the disability community. I mean, I remember some people were saying to me, I mean, I do use a stick, and, you know, as you can see, but some people say, oh, maybe you shouldn't be involved in disability campaigning because you're not in a wheelchair, or you don't look disabled enough. And I really find that offensive and saddening that that comes from disability community, some people in the community. And I think, why, at what point does something become absolute?
Yeah.
And what point, you know, like, it's like, oh no, you don't look Aboriginal because you've only had one parent, you're too white. You need to be dark skinned.
Yeah.
And this happened, you know, I remember Lydia Thorpe got that, you know, a couple of months ago, and they said her father was, I can't remember, a month, you know, and then people attacked that person. Anyone in a public profile, or wants to be an advocate, you know, they seem to attack the person or look for things that you can't change. We can't change we can try your skin tone. You can't, and you can't change the way you were conceived and brought into the world. And why is it that you can't have a positionality unless you're seen as someone who is totally whole? And what does whole mean? And what I mean by whole, oh, you're dark skinned, you fit the stereotype. Yeah, you're allowed to have the platform and have a voice and have credibility. But if you don't look like that, or you don't have a disability, you're not disabled enough to connect to that, therefore we can't have you do that. That's really shameful, because what is it saying to us? Isn't it just playing into that kind of role? Like, surely it should come from within, how we connect with people and feel. Isn't it about the experience that we have with our environment and the challenges that we face, and also the successes that we have that we can share? But for some reason, it seems that people want to almost have the credential that, no, you have to look a certain way, you have to be a certain way. And then I say to people in our communities that, what are you playing to? And I say that, when they say, what playing to? I say, you're playing right into the arms of what, you know, back to the eugenics era, when people had to, you know, people didn't have type of head shape, type of eyes, you know, and people were categorized, you know, and then, you know, awful, like what happened in, you know, when people were just murdered because they didn't look a certain way, to eradicate people based on their presentations. So I don't know. I'm just disappointed that somehow in the community we still get that the opponents will kind of attack the person's sense of identity as not being authentic enough to speak or have a voice, because how can they?
And that's one thing I love about the work that you do is you allow voices to be heard, and you don't speak on behalf of people, but you create platforms for voices to actually come out, and voices that, and also allow people to think about how to allow those voices to come out as well, if that
Yeah,
makes
because you don't want to, like, there's no point in you setting up a service or platform and then you hang on to that role and forever. For me, and that's how, but that's my, I guess, the way I work, or my way of being in the world. I love volunteering because for me, giving to community, all communities makes, I guess it's a bit selfish. I feel as though I have some worth, but also it's like, wow, isn't it great that I was part of this space? I was able to be involved. I'm happy to step back and let others proceed because one, I'm aware of my age, one, aware of my limitations, but also I want to see other people flourish. I love the idea of watching people grow, people develop. I love it when I see people from the community like yourself and achieve so many goals. And it's as though, because I don't have any family, adopted or anyone, I'm part of it. I think, oh, isn't that great? They've done this. Oh, wow, they've achieved that. And I see that as wonderful. And for some reason in our community, and this is for the whole communities, people, I don't know if it's jealousy or they think it's platform seeking, but it's not. It's like, why can't we celebrate? Why does everyone think that everything is limited? We can't give everyone a space to share. There's oxygen for everybody, I say. There's room for everybody to be on this world. Why do we create borders on things? Like we have physical borders, and then we create borders among, oh no, you can only have certain people doing things. But if people step up to the page and they want to, isn't that great that they're speaking up? We should let everybody who wants to speak, speak. Why do we have to knock people down and only have one or two people? If the people that choose to be there, we should support them and encourage them and give them the resource and celebrate that as humans. We've all, doesn't, just because one person does A, B, and C doesn't make you less of a human or less valuable. You're valuable in what you bring to the world and how you see the world around you.
whether you come with X, Y, and Z, it doesn't make any difference from A, B, and
Oh, that's right. That's why I mean, I guess it's so that's why I really respect you and value your friendship. And it's like, and I don't know, some people get frightened when they say to me things like, "Oh, come," because they know I'm in private rent, and I talk about housing. And I said to this person, I don't feel resentful or jealous if someone owns a property or lives in a certain suburb. That's not what friendship is about, or connecting with another human. It's connecting from the soul. It's like connecting. I value this person because I love the way they think of the world and the way they interact and give to the world. That's what connects you to the person, not with what they present or bring
yeah.
materialistically. This is just a built thing that humans do here. But I value as anybody. Could be somebody who's in a crisis accommodation, to someone living in a car, to living in a mansion. If the person comes from a heart and they're a person whose soul I connect with, that's what respect and humanity should be about, not what you can bring or what you've acquired, or or judge someone on that. But for some reason, even though I'm getting older and older, it seems to be the case for some people is something you get judged, or it's almost like you want to be teared down, because, oh, they've got this or they're doing that. And that's just so sad.
I want to close off for a second, but there's two things I want to mention. One is that you keep saying you're getting older and older, but I want to say from the posts that you're putting up, you're becoming more glamorous
Ah,
as you
I'm
age.
trying to, darling, in my 50s, golden girls. Yeah,
Yeah,
well, age is beautiful, and I think that I am not the person I was when I was 20, and I'm fine with that. I'm comfortable with that. And, I feel as though I'm coming more into my own personhood, whatever that means. And
yeah,
it's about being comfortable, they use the word, in the skin I am, and I know who I am, and being surrounded by people who care genuinely and respect and share information and resources. That's all life could be. It's a really about, don't waste the time on people who want to hurt you or who are negative, because there will always be negative people. It's like somebody said to me, which was a really lovely comment. They said, Ricki, we like the fact that you're not somebody who pushes or shouts and demands for change. And I said, well, there's no need for that. I think you get more with honey than with just attacking people. And I've been around people who are like that, advocates who are just angry people who attack all day long. And I think you sit in that anger and you fester, and then that eats at you. That serves no purpose because it alienates you. I know that some people feel frustrated, but you have to sometimes put some of that aside and think, what is it that I can connect with that person? Even if they totally oppose me, look for something good in that person to connect, so that when you leave that interaction, your body, your mind, your energy, your aura, you feel, I've given as much as I can. I can walk away, peace in mind. I did my best. Whether they change or not, that's on to them. Whether they don't respect you, that's on to them. Main thing is that you give goodness, you accept people as they are, and then you keep working on what means something to you, and you just keep moving on. You do something, you move on. Everyone's different. That's how I operate in my head.
my last question is, there's a whole pile of books behind you.
Mm.
Do you have a favorite book behind you, your go-to book?
I think, yeah, and it's oh gosh, what a question to ask me. Because, I love so many books. Actually, it is one, and it's the healing one I've got,
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
called Psyche on the Skin.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and it's quite confronting. It's quite dark, and it was to do with self-harm
Yeah,
and the power. And I did a workshop last year for Transcend on the power of skin,
yeah,
and we looked at disrupting notions of beauty, notions of race, notions of gender on skin, and we explored it. And we looked at textures, we looked at, and we, oddly enough, I made it, we stayed away from color.
yeah.
That's the reason, but we talked in textures, we talked in under the skin, to really connect to that deeper sense of self. And, almost the mirror, the role of the mirror, and what we need to reflect from that. Is the mirror a necessity? And then you kind of look at, so that to me was really symbolic, because it really relates to the essence of me, getting judged all the time by my appearance. I'm not female enough for some people. I'm too big. I'm not black enough for some people. I'm not white enough for some people. Skin. Yeah. So that book resonates with me.
Look, I want to say thank you once again for joining us today. I know the viewers will love seeing you again, because you are someone that they always ask about when they've watched the videos. Oh, how's Ricki? I love the Ricki video to start off with. So I know that they'll love seeing you right at the end.
Well,
So
thank you for
you very
having
much.
me, darling.
No, anytime. I'll season 7, I'll bring you back as well. But I always want to say thank you very much. There's a big heart coming to
Big
you.
love to you too, my darling, and all the best for you and your family. And remember, keep strong, keep doing what you're doing, because every step you make, there's a lot of people watching you and learning from you, especially the younger communities. So you are a very positive role model. Never forget that everything that you do, the ripple effect in the community is wide.
Thank you very much. Now, guys, I'll say thank you and I'll join you at the next series. But see you guys later. Bye.